Hello to all my retro vintage game friends out there in the world. I hope that you're all doing great. Today we are going to tackle kind of my long-term view on graded video games and why I'm kind of more or less bullish on investing in graded video games. But before I get started, please hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and if you like what you hear, the like button, just so we can kind of try to build this channel out as quickly as we possibly can. Tell all your friends about it. This is a really fun, up-and-coming market that has a lot of momentum, and I think that it's going to continue on, and I'm going to talk about that today. First off, let me also differentiate between I'm talking about retro and vintage video games when I'm talking in this video. I think that for modern video games, graded modern video games, there probably is some short-term opportunities, and maybe there is some long-term opportunities as well. It's just for me in particular, I'm more focused on the vintage and the retro stuff just for that added scarcity that the modern games don't necessarily have, at least right this second. We don't know exactly, how many of the modern games are going to, be printed out and how many are going to survive, kind of how many are going to be in good condition. But just the fact that people are now collecting limited edition games and they're considered collectibles items on the modern side makes me a little bit nervous. Because anything that is deemed collectible, a lot of times it's mass produced, and if it's deemed collectible, it's just not scarce enough for it to become a real market. In most cases, I would say. A lot of times these things end up becoming valuable because just like we see with sports cards, comic books, everything else, they might have made a lot of it back in the day, but nobody kept it and no one kept it in good shape. And that's what we see with like black box NES games, maybe as new as PlayStation 1 games and those sorts of things. And of course, Atari and everything else. But that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, the big risk, and we've talked about this, is just, is there just like we hear the story of like the ET Atari game where they dumped, 1 million plus games or more, into the landfill. Are there somewhere kind of pallets full or, warehouse full or storage unit full of sealed games to where we just, have kind of a whack in supply, the supply gets out of whack and then it brings prices down. That's kind of the risk that we all take when investing, buying and selling in graded games. The one thing that really I am bullish about is that Collectors Universe, PSA, bought WATA, and I'm just kind of like putting all these pieces together because I operate in sports cards, graded comic books, and now graded video games, and there is huge momentum for these nostalgic items, for these collectibles, and I don't think when I hear kind of naysayers talk about this particular market, the reason I'm a little skeptical because first off, of course, nobody knows how this is going to turn out. And I don't think that even though we can look at previous cycles for collectibles and kind of values and how they've gone up and down, whether we're talking about rare collectibles or antiques or whatever it is, I think that there's some similarities, but I think that there could be some differences. And that has to do with 80s and 90s pop culture type collectibles and those brands going on and on. I guess that's the whole point. When we look at Nintendo, we look at Mario Brothers, just for example, is Mario Brothers still going to be relevant in 20, 30, 50 years? I think that it will. They're building theme parks around this stuff. Bigger brands are buying into the smaller brands. Disney's buying Marvel. Who knows? Maybe Disney will buy Nintendo at some point. These are the types of acquisitions that take place. And then you have a conglomerate like Disney that keeps it going forever. So when I hear comparisons to graded video games and Beanie Babies, I don't think they're the same. I think that the Beanie Baby craze was kind of an anomaly, or Pogs or some of these other things. But that was during a time where everything was overproduced. It was marketed very well. And again, marketed as a collectible, a Beanie Baby, marketed as a collectible. There still are some really rare Beanie Babies that are actually worth some serious money. I think there's a couple of little like Stegosaurus or dinosaurs or something that are, tens of thousands of dollars. But the main point is that what ended up becoming valuable for those is the stuff that's actually truly scarce. And that was the issue. Is it truly scarce? With modern video games, when you're buying those and grading them, they're not really scarce. Now, it's something that maybe you want to hold on to over time. And maybe you think that, it could be something that brings back that sort of nostalgia for somebody down the road. But it is just like with other collectibles. It's I would say more safe, so to speak, going after kind of the older, more vintage stuff, just because it's already kind of proven its mettle. You already know, okay, in sports, you already know this person's a Hall of Famer, or this person has had a long career, successful career, has, card sales over time that you can look at to try to figure out pricing and what makes sense. With stuff that's new, it's very tricky. So the graded video game market, while it's fun and exciting, it's completely speculative right now. It hasn't evolved into what I think it's going to evolve into. I'm kind of playing the side of, I think that we're early on video games. Now, if you got into this 3, 4, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, you were very early into this. And I think that there's collectors of these games that are unhappy about these sorts of items becoming, collectible or investments. And I understand that, if you're somebody that's out collecting these things, and maybe you'll never have them graded and maybe you'll never sell. But what I've seen in sports cards, it's kind of funny. You have a lot of the huge sales are not necessarily people that got in recently. It's a lot of longtime collectors where stuff has just reached a price point where they're like, all right, if this thing's $1 million, then I'm going to sell it. That you're seeing a lot of that too. So it's not just that it's just investors that came in over the last couple of years that are buying and selling these things. There are longtime collectors that are deciding to sell as well that are mixed into that group. I also think for myself, while of course I've got a good foundation of traditional investments, stocks, bonds, real estate, I also am open-minded to alternative investments, and those can be, of course, they're more speculative, they're more risky, they don't have the same sorts of regulations in place, I suppose, but there are opportunities with these that aren't necessarily there for, stocks, bonds, real estate. I mean, let's face it, the stock market's at all-time highs and real estate prices are at all-time highs. So for me, not that I'm still investing in those things, but it's not, I feel like I'm buying high on these things. I'm buying high on a lot of my traditional investments right now. Will the stock market, will the Dow Jones eventually be 50,000 or 100,000? Maybe, but maybe it'll be 5,000 next year. We just don't know. So I think it's kind of fun for me and for my family to just kind of hedge with some of these other things that are enjoyable too. And I look at them as historical artifacts. So it is kind of that fun investment. It is speculative, but there are signs that it is moving in the right direction. And I don't think it's just the emotion and the nostalgia that just wants that to happen for me. I think that it's big money, big business coming in that's kind of showing that's kind of proving that with, a lot of the big acquisitions that are happening right now with third-party grading companies. We had PSA Collectors Universe buying WADA, and there's probably going to be more acquisitions. Who knows? Maybe VGA will be bought up. CGC, the big comic book grading company, is getting into video game grading. I think that's going to take some time though, because CGC also got into sports cards over the last little bit, and it took a while to get that up and running. It was like a year almost, I think, from when they announced they were going to do it and when they actually rolled it out. So that's not, I don't anticipate video game grading becoming something that's overnight and they're doing it. So that's where it's kind of like, but it's interesting. You have all the big players that are getting into video game grading, and there's so many different kind of items within the collectibles world that they could choose to grade, but it's kind of like, this is a market that has proved itself. People are in it and they are buying it. The market drives a lot of this stuff. And so again, I think for the retro vintage type games, a lot of the first prints, a lot of the stuff from the 80s, and even into the 90s as well, a lot of that stuff just didn't survive. Games were made to be played and they were opened, they're not sealed, and then the boxes weren't kept nicely. And I see a lot of collectors as well, for people that did keep those boxes nice, they like them. They want to hold on to them. They want to keep that. They want to keep it for themselves in their collection. They're not necessarily flippers, that are looking to kind of, sell those off and make money off of them. So it's an interesting dynamic, but that's kind of, we talked about this in a previous video with, are you a collector, an investor, a speculator? And we're all probably a little bit of all of these things. Although I think there are some true hardcore collectors, and I think there's some true investors that don't really care. They don't have a nostalgic, feeling towards any of this stuff. But they're just interested in kind of, the money that can be made, and that comes with any sort of market. So I don't see that changing. I'm just excited to see where this all goes, all the retro video game market. I hope to go to a show at some point. If you guys know of shows, I'm in North Carolina, so if there's anything that's within striking distance, I would love to get to one and just experience it. I just went to the National Sports Card Show here last week, and it was unbelievable. The community was just fantastic, and I would like to kind of build that as well within video games. games within graded video games and preserving these items that are incredible. These, art pieces, if you will. That's how I look at it. They're great display pieces, and it's awesome. It's owning a piece of history. Happens to be from my childhood, but also I think relevant down the line. I think it's going to be interesting too when 50 years down the road, when who knows how you're going to be playing video games. You might just plug into, might have a button on your head, and it turns on the game, and that's how you play. So I think it'd be funny, people saying like, what is that? Is that an actual like box with a game inside of it? Why would anybody buy a box with a game inside of it? I think these are going to be, and when these are antiques, I think they're going to be the coolest, for a lot of these. I think the younger, folks are going to be like, wow, I can't believe this is how it used to be. But I think for us, as we age up, it'll be like, wow, look where it's all come. This is where it started, and now look at what it is. And I think that's going to add to the mystique and just add to the fun of all this. So guys, I hope that you have an amazing day. Like I said, if you have not subscribed yet, we are going to continue coming out with these types of videos. Tell all your friends about it, and let's get in the comments, chat about it. I'll start doing live streams as well here in a little bit on this channel, just to try to get some community together here, get into the chat, learn more about you guys. I'm still learning about this market in general, and I'm having a blast doing it. So thank you for joining me here today. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.